Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my Prot Paladin guide for Season 2 of The War Within. Season 1 saw Prot Paladin as an extremely dominant tank with 95% or something of top keys being done by Prot Paladin. Season 2, we're seeing quite a few nerfs going into the season, so Refining Fire getting significantly nerfed, Uther's Council's getting halved from 30 to 15, and also on the left we're losing half of a Lightforged Blessing. It used to be 2%, now it's 1%. Also, we're losing some parry from Strengths and Adversity from, I believe it's 25% to 15% in max stacks. However, despite all that, Prot Paladin still looks somewhat okay for Season 2. I would say it's probably one of the strongest tanks. Remains to be seen what actually is going to be required in Season 2, whether it's like utility, in which case Paladin's the best, or just straight up defensive power, in which case I would say Demon Hunter probably has the edge, or Paladin. Paladin's damage is still very good. It's not like completely overpowering compared to other seasons, but it is still extremely high. One of the highest in the game for tanks at the moment. As for which hero talent to play, Lightsmith and Templar I would say are both viable going into the new season. The new tier set is much better for Templar than it is for Lightsmith. On top of that, Lightsmith also saw another nerf with Tempered in Battle being capped to 1 tick per proc, and also Refining Fire is a much larger portion of Lightsmith's damage, and that got nerfed quite a bit, wherein Templar is not as affected by the nerf. I would say overall, at least from my PTR testing, the damage is pretty close. For some reason, I was doing more damage with Lightsmith still than Templar, which I was not expecting. Templar has less mana issues since you cast less Word of Glories, and then Lightsmith has like slightly better self-sustain because you have Divine Guidance. So later in the season, I would not be surprised to see people trying out Templar and seeing how it goes. But for now, I would say stick with Lightsmith at the start. For builds, this is my default Lightsmith build. You'll note compared to Season 1, we are dropping Uther's Council, so we can play both Moment of Glory and Bastion of Light. This is quite an offensive build. If you want, you can drop Moment of Glory or Bastion of Light for Uther's Council or IV tier, or just both if you want. Either way, I would say Uther's Council is not as required as it was before, since it's, half the talent that it was, literally. But yeah, this is my default build. It does pretty high damage. This is probably the highest damage build you can play, other than potentially swapping Spellwarding to Inspiring Vanguard. For the Templar build, you need to play IV tier and Inmost Light to proc Hammer of Light. I dropped Bulwark of Righteous Fury for that, and I also don't play Moment of Glory, so I could play Inner Light. I'm not sure if if Bastion of Light or Bulwark is more damage, but for now I'm playing Bulwark. Playing Bastion because it procs more Green Hammers, and it gives you more cooldown reduction. So overall for Season 2, I would say Lightsmith is a pretty safe choice to start with. But it is possible that Templar ends up doing more damage. I'm not 100% sure. I will have to see like a bunch of sims and tests in the future. Basic PTR testing, I found that I think Lightsmith is probably higher damage if you can play this build, but if you start having to drop some of these talents, then maybe Templar is better. They are very close damage-wise. All right, for the choices, so we already mentioned you can drop Inspiring Vanguard for spell warding, which I do in the default build since spell warding is such a popular choice. Not sure exactly how many dungeons you will need it for in Season 2. Stay tuned. If I play a lot of Paladin in Season 2, then there will probably be a spreadsheet later going over that. As far as Moment of Glory and IV tier, we've already covered that, so you can play IV tier and Uther's Council if you want more defensive talents, but this is like the most offensive build you can play. As Templar, you do need to play IV tier and Inmost Light, so you keep that in mind. Bastion of Light is the only real flex point down here. You can swap it for either Bulwark of Righteous Fury or Uther's Council. Crit Wings versus Sentinel. I think pretty much everyone is just playing Crit Wings nowadays. I think that is it for the talent choices. For the Lightsmith tree, you're almost always going to be playing Divine Guidance. You can play Blessed Assurance in Raid because you're playing Hammer of the Righteous, but in Keys, don't do that. Just play Divine Guidance. For your weapon proc, you're going to want Divine Inspiration, usually for higher DPS. But it does give you a little bit less control of your like Sacred Weapon and Holy Bulwark, so you can use the other one as well. I believe it's called Forewarning. And Tempered in Battle, despite the nerf, is still broken. Definitely play it. As for the class tree, you have a bunch of choices, and I'm not going to go over all of them. Just make sure you kind of have Divine Toll and Resonance and Divine Purpose. And definitely play Sack as well. But there are a lot of utility choices that you can change around here, so just be ready to do that. The default build is pretty good though, so if you don't want to change anything, you could just stick with the default build. Those are the talents. As far as stats go, it's pretty much the same as Season 1. In my opinion, Haste is your best stat. Crit is very slightly worse because Strength and Adversity, which is a talent here,
got nerfed. Before it was worth 25% parry on 5 targets. Now it's 15%, which means you have less additive parry, which means crit is like somewhat worse at giving you defensive value for more parry. Offensively, however, it's the same comparison. Crit is the best offensive stat after haste. Especially if you play Templar, crit is extremely important. So as Lightsmith, crit is pretty important because when you crit your judgment, you get a hammer and anvil proc. But as Templar, it's even more important because, you know, hammer and anvil wasn't a big portion of your damage. As Templar, Empyrean Hammer is a very, very large portion of your damage. And when your Empyrean Hammer crits, thanks to Wrathful Descent, it hits AoE. So it's very, very important to have high crit for Templar. So for Mastery, I would say Mastery is probably your best defensive stat in Season 2. Since parry is not going to be as relevant, I would say, especially with the nerf to strengthen adversity. I would still play high crit, otherwise you can do no damage, but Mastery is going to be better than before. I would play at minimum 100% spell block, so that is going to be 9420 with a shaman, or 10,800 without a shaman. You could even go higher than that if you want. Probably not going to do as high damage, as we mentioned, but defensively, Mastery is going to be your best stat after haste. So if you don't know what 100% spell block is, there is a video going over that, linked in the document. But basically, you have a bunch of block buffs that apply to spell blocks since you're a paladin. If you put all of them up and you have enough mastery to get to 52% on sheet, then you'll have 100% spell block, so any magical tank buster will automatically be blocked, which means it's going to be reduced by roughly 40 to 50% baseline, which is very good for prot paladin. Some of them will one-shot you through that, but it's a good starting point at least to have that. For trinkets, as of the point that we're making this video, we are owed like 2 to 3 trinket tunings, which Blizzard has mentioned they will do. So this list is not final that you see in the video. I will probably update the document once more trinket tuning has been done. But basically on PTR, I played a Tome of Light's Devotion plus Bomb Suit in almost every single key. Tome of Light's Devotion is an extremely strong offensive trinket. It has 2 modes, so one mode is like armor and a magic shield, which is completely useless. It's very undertuned. But by manipulating your use of the trinket, you can put it in offense mode most of the time. The offense mode is a damage proc plus crit, which are both really good for prot paladin. Ideally, you're playing this trinket and you're keeping it in offense mode. There will probably be like a whole nother video talking about how to use this trinket since it's a little bit complicated. But yeah, it's the best trinket right now. And also, I've been playing Bomb Suit in every key. Combustible Bomb Suit is from the raid. Basically the equivalent of the Ravenous Scarab, Stormlord's Authority from Season 1, except it doesn't have a passive component, and the active component is extremely strong. I would say endgame, you may not be using this, I'm not sure, but like with the longer cooldowns that Paladin now has, I've been finding this pretty useful. Like just as a fill-in. If you don't want to play this, then there are some other good damage trinkets available, such as Viscera of Coalesce Hatred is extremely strong in the damage department. If you want to go like half-half, you can play a stat stick trinket, such as Improvised Euphorium Pacemaker or House of Cards. House of Cards is basically like Skarmorak Shard or Mark of Cardress from Season 1. It's a 90-second mastery stat stick. So those are all viable, but me personally, I played Tome plus Bomb Suit on every key on PTR. Scrapfield 9001 is also viable. If you want double defensive trinket, then you probably play Scrapfield plus Bomb Suit. That's it for trinkets right now. There will be tuning in the future, so I wouldn't, get married to any of these trinkets yet, since the season's not even out yet. All right, embellishments. I have not seen a reason. There probably will be one later released, but I have not seen a reason where say that it'll probably be any different from Season 1. So in Season 1, pretty much everyone crafted sword and shield at the beginning for the eye level boost, and you crafted Ascension on your sword, Writhing Armor Band on your shield. I don't see why you would not do that in Season 2. And then towards the end game, once people started getting like, full mythic gear, they weren't worried about crests anymore. They swapped their weapon to a max eye level weapon, so it'll be 678 in the new season. And the shield to a max eye level shield. In the new season, there is a special shield called Titan of Industry, which is crit haste, which is, great for prot paladin. Also has an extra effect where it has a dot, I think, on your main target. And that's free. It doesn't come at the cost of any stats, so this is going to be your best shield for sure. You'll probably go back to swapping to double Dawn Thread, which is what I have right now on live, or Dawn Thread plus Binding of Binding, whichever you prefer. As far as the other special items go special Titan of Industry, the best shield we talked about already. Cersei's Circlet is the Siren's Isle ring from Season 1. It is going to be good at the start of the season, but it is capped at eye level 658, which means that you'll eventually replace it once you get high eye level rings. Considering that the ring trick, I believe, for crafting rings is still in the game, that might be sooner than a lot of people think. And the Jaster Diamond is the very rare ring from the last boss. It is a very good item, however, the effect is not strong enough to overcome, the fact that it's heroic if you have a heroic one. You really want this item on Mythic, and it drops from the last boss, so it's going to be pretty hard to get. I think most people are probably going to end up using 2 crafted rings for a while until they actually get a Mythic Jaster Diamond. Alright, so your cooldowns. Prot Paladin has a lot of cooldowns. The first one we'll talk about is Wings. So Wings is actually one of your strongest cooldowns on Trash, even without Sentinel. That is because in Wings, all of your healing is increased by 20%, and it has a higher chance, and has a 20% higher chance to crit. Also, you're just generating more Holy Power baseline. Since your Judgment generates 2 Holy Power, you have access to Hammer of Wrath. And if you play Lightsmith, you also get a free Tempered in Battle from the Sacred Weapon that it pops out. Also, that Sacred Weapon is copying your Word of Glory, so your Word of Glories are increased by even more than 20% during Wings. So Wings is probably your best cooldown against sustained damage. However, obviously it does not come with any damage reduction, so against a Tank Buster, it's not going to be very effective. However, if you are like just taking a lot of damage and you need to heal yourself a lot, Wings is your best cooldown there. It is also like your main damage cooldown, and you have a lot of cooldown reduction on it, so you're going to be spamming Wings off cooldown pretty much. Sometimes you'll Wings twice in a pull. However, it is somewhat important that you get full value out of your Wings, and it does last quite a while thanks to Zealot's Paragon. So make sure you are getting full value out of every Wings. And it's also somewhat important to have Wings on pull for most pulls, so you have like good aggro. If you don't have Wings on pull, oftentimes you'll have to use Guardian of Ancient Kings plus Divine Toll outside of Wings, so that's like not ideal. So yeah, keep that in mind. All right, Eye of Tyr is very different for Lightsmith and Templar. As Templar, it's like another massive cooldown that you want to be spamming off cooldown. Procs Sacrosanct Crusade, which gives you a big shield and a big heal thanks to the Hammer of Light. And it does still give the 5% damage reduction for 6 seconds. As Lightsmith, you kind of want to only use it basically when you have nothing else and you're going to be taking moderate damage. It's just like not that strong, and it also doesn't last very long. You don't want to be using, it's like not very effective, and it also doesn't really do that much damage. You're mostly just using it as a filler as Lightsmith, but as Templar, you're spamming it off cooldown. All right, Ardent Defender, I would say, is your like bread and butter cooldown. So this has a very low cooldown with all of this cooldown reduction that is attached to it. And it also comes with a couple cool things. So it has 20% damage reduction baseline. Also, it has a cheat death built into it. So that means no Tank Buster basically can kill you through Ardent Defender. In Season 2, a lot of the Tank Busters are not actually that deadly. And a lot of the deadly ones come with an additional effect with them, like a dot or a heal absorb. For instance, in Floodgate, the first boss has a Tank Buster that has a dot attached to it. The third boss has a Tank Buster with a heal absorb, and the fourth boss has a Tank Buster with a dot. The Ardent Defender is not going to be as effective as it was in Season 1. But that's not saying much, because in Season 1 it was extremely effective against every Tank Buster. But it is still a very low cooldown, so you're going to want to be using this basically off cooldown, because it has such a low cooldown. If you think you're in any danger at all and this button is up, just push it. It has such a low cooldown, especially with the new Tierset giving you a lot of refunds on Shield of the Righteous sometimes, and especially in Wings. We're generating and spending a lot of Holy Power, so sending this on cool like immediately in your Wings is a very good idea most of the time. Honestly, the existence of this as like a short cooldown is one of the main reasons that you're able to play crit Wings instead of Sentinels, so definitely just spam it. Alright, next is Guardian of Ancient Kings. So this is a 50% DR. It has a 5-minute cooldown, however, that is very deceptive since it's reduced by 2 talents. Number 1, it's reduced every time you spend Holy Power, and number 2, it's reduced by Golden Valkyr every time a Shield of the Righteous hits, which means it's reduced significantly on AoE, especially when you use Divine Toll. So basically what that means is you can use this quite a bit on Trash. I think it's like more than every other pull, and on bosses it's basically one-time use only. If you don't have Wings on pull, I would say strongly consider using Guardian of Ancient Kings on pull, since like Wings is one of your major ways to like recruit your health from the health you lose fighting Trash, and Guardian of Ancient Kings is like pretty strong. You can also consider using Divine Shield, so this is the next cooldown we're going to talk about. This is your bubble with the talent Final Stand. You basically taunt everything for 8 seconds and become immune. It basically solves all your problems, like you get aggro, you become immune to damage, you'd also drop all your debuffs, and you'll probably get healed in those 8 seconds to full. So it's a very, very strong cooldown. It also has a relatively short cooldown. I think it's 3 minutes now with the new Uther's Council, which is reduced by Righteous Protector. In Season 1, the cooldown was extremely short. You could almost use it like every pull. Season 2, the cooldown is going to be a little bit longer, unless you get a Tierset proc. So it's probably going to be more like every other pull. Maybe you can use it like once at the start and then once at the end of the next pull or something like that. But the cooldown is going to be longer, but it is still very strong. The conditions I would say for using this on Trash are generally you try to want to not use it during Wings, Because in wings, you're very strong against trash. You have extremely high self-sustain. You have the free temperament in battle, generating a lot of holy power. So it's kind of wasted if you use it during wings. But after wings, if Ardent is on cooldown, I would say my next go-to is Divine Shield. We want to be putting this on cooldown as much as possible. It's also just your strongest cooldown, obviously, because it makes you immune to damage. There are a couple cool tricks you can do with this. So when you're bubbled, you can use your sack freely, since, you know, all the extra damage you take from Blessing of Sacrifice is immune from bubble. Also, Tempered in Battle works very well with bubble. Let's say you Sacred Weapon an ally, and there's like a big, huge raid hit hitting everyone at 10%, and you bubble it, right? So you're going to bubble it, you're going to take no damage, and then your ally is going to go to 10%, and then Tempered in Battle is going to instantly top them to 100, and then it's going to try and steal that health from you, but that health is also that health steal is also getting bubbled. So Tempered Bubble is extremely strong. It was way stronger in Season 1, since you could have multiple hits from Tempered in Battle, but in Season 2, it is still very strong. Alright, so Lay on Hands. One of the two biggest mistakes, actually, I see from people playing Prot Paladin when I do coaching is they don't use Divine Shield enough. You know, you should use Divine Shield if Wings is not up and Ardent is not up and you're taking any damage, just instant bubble. Lay on Hands is the next button that people don't really use enough. In my opinion, it has roughly a 2-minute cooldown with all of the talents, and it's a full heal. If you're at 1 health and you lay on hands, it's a top. You top yourself. If your ally is almost dead, you lay on hands, boom, it tops them. With Imperial Ward, it also gives you some armor, but the armor is like not that much armor, to be honest. It's barely noticeable most of the time. The biggest thing though is that a lot of paladins say, oh my god, I have so many mana problems as prop paladin, I always have to drink. I would say Lay on Hands is your biggest answer for that, because let's say you're like at 30 or 40% health, 1 Word of Glory is probably not going to top you. You probably need like 3 Word of Glories, honestly, to top yourself. Or you could just use 1 off global Lay on Hands, which is going to be worth like 3 globals plus a lot of holy power plus 750k mana out of your 2.5 million pool. So it's actually insane at saving mana if you just lay on hand yourself a lot. All right, the next play we'll talk about is spell warding. Oh, also, the one key thing for using lay on hands in this way is playing the talent Lights Revocation. So a lot of the time, if you use lay on hands that way, you lock yourself out of using bubble. If you play the talent Lights Revocation, then it doesn't lock you out. All right, anyway, for spell warding is very useful to use on yourself. There are a lot of magical tank busters, and if you spell ward yourself, obviously you take no damage from them. It's usually used as like a fill-in. Like, let's say there's a boss and it's doing a tank buster like every 30 seconds. You need to come up with something. Usually if it goes something like Ardent the first one, and then Bubble, and then Guardian, and then Ardent again, and then Spellward, etc. So think of it as just another button in the rotation against magical tank busters. If you can survive the key without using spell warding on yourself, obviously it is very useful in a lot of situations for your allies, so do consider that as well. So against physical tank busters, you could use Bop, but Bop is a little bit different than spell warding and Bubble, since those two can immune yourself while you keep aggro. If you Bop yourself, you will immediately basically lose aggro effectively of everything near you. Technically you still have aggro, but there's like a special case where if you have aggro and you're bopped, and it ignores you and it starts hitting your allies. Bop is really only useful against physical tank busters, and only if there is no trash on the boss. The way you use it against bosses is you would taunt the boss first right before the tank buster, then you cast tank buster, you bop yourself, and then tank buster hits, and then before your taunt falls off, you cancelaura the bop. So the boss is basically always either taunted on you during bop, or you're not bopped full time, so there's no chance of your allies getting hit. But you can immune tank busters this way. In Season 2, I think there are not that many cases for this, although there are a couple I can think of. In Season 1, there were 2 bosses that I used this on. First boss in Arakara, and also Stone Vault. Alright, so Gift of the Golden Valkyr. This is your proc. It's on a 45-second cooldown. Don't consider this a cheat death. If you take lethal damage and this is off cooldown, you will still die. It is not a cheat death. It is just a random proc that can happen when you accidentally dip low. You'll proc Guardian of Ancient Kings. One thing to note about this is that you want to proc this second in all cases. If you proc it first, then using another instance of Guardian of Ancient Kings will override it. If you proc it second, then it extends it. Obviously, it's not that easy to control, but that's how you want things to play out if possible. All right, next we'll talk about your basic mitigation. So Prop Pally has a lot of passive things you need to keep up. So the first thing is obviously Consecrate. You need to stay in your Consecrate as much as possible. In War Within, it is not as important, I would say, to stay in your Consecrate as it was before, since your Mastery has been slightly nerfed, and your Tierset doesn't really interact with Consecrate as it did in Season 3 Dragonflight. However, it is kind of free to just stay in your Consecrate, so do that whenever possible. It's just that if you have to run around too much and you're like not in your consecrate, don't think, oh no, I'm gonna die because I'm running consecrate. It's not actually that big of a deal. Also, as Lightsmith, you tend to use consecrate a lot, which refreshes like the location of it, thanks to divine guidance. So don't worry too much about it. Also, 100% uptime on Shield of the Righteous. This should happen naturally as long as you're like generating and spending holy power. There are some cases where like if you use too many Avenger shields or Word of Glories on other people maybe, this can drop off, but generally as long as you're like building and spending holy power, you should have 100% uptime on Shield of the Righteous. Just track it anyway, in my opinion, and if it ever falls off, just know that you are going to be in massive danger. It's a big part of your mitigation. There's also a couple passive buffs that are kept up by Avenger Shield. So there's Barricade of Faith, which is 10% block. That's for 10 seconds. And there's also Strength in Adversity, which is the parry talent. It's up to 15% parry now in AoE on 5 targets. Basically, you just want to throw one Avenger Shield every 9 to 10 seconds, which should be happening anyway because it's one of your highest DPS abilities, or like there's going to be an interrupt that you need to snipe in the pack somewhere. But if you're playing Templar or something, and there's no interrupts, do make sure you throw an Avenger Shield every 9 to 10 seconds. Otherwise, you're going to be missing these defensive buffs. All right, as far as cooldowns go, this can be like kind of liquid because you're going to go into a pull and not all your cooldowns are always going to be instantly up immediately. You kind of have to improvise a little bit to make it work. I would say the biggest things are wings on pull, if it's up. Wings ardent on pull is generally a good idea. Then in your wings, you can kind of go until you proc Golden Valkyrie, unless you're fighting trash that'll actually one-shot you. Would be against a really tough pull. I would do that, and then Real Guardian after that falls off. Then you can lay on hands yourself if you want, or if you don't want to lay on hands yourself, you can also just use bubble, and then stay lay on hands for another time. Lay on hands would just be to like make the pull last a little bit longer. After lay on hands and your bubble and your guardian, usually Ardent will be back at that point. And then after your Ardent's over, it's usually time to kite, or just tank the pack with no cooldowns. If you're playing Eye of Tyr, you can also throw it anywhere. I probably wouldn't put it at the end. But yeah, this is like a sample pull cooldown rotation, but it is going to change. Like not every pull is going to demand that you use Guardian of Ancient Kings, which means you'll probably hold it, etc. And there are quite a few things that could happen that change how you use your cooldowns. This is just an example. As Templar, also you want to use Eye of Tyr off cooldown every time since it's proccing your Hammer of Light and it's a big portion of your damage. And it's also healing you a lot from Sacrosanct Crusade. Also, offensive rotation. So this is also a little bit liquid. There's, I'm sure, a correct answer for all of this, but this is basically how I play. Get as many interrupts as possible. So if there are interrupts available in the pack, then my first priority is Avenger Shield as an interrupt. This is your number one priority. It's a double global, basically, because every time you interrupt, proc punishment. So you're casting both Avenger Shield and Blessed Hammer for one global. And obviously, you're also interrupting the enemy. Next priority will be to use Judgment. In almost every scenario, you want to be spamming Judgment as much as possible. Both hero trees interact with Judgment, and especially in Wings, you're getting 2 holy power every time you Judgment, so you want to be spamming Judgment as much as possible. Next, the next priority, this is where I differ from a lot of people, is I would prioritize Blessed Hammer. As Avenger Shield and Judgment are both on cooldown. That is because every time you Blessed Hammer, you have a chance to proc Grand Crusader and reset Avenger Shield and Judgment. The reason you want to do that is because I prioritize the Avenger Shield interrupt global more than any other global that you can possibly do. And if you're spamming Blessed Hammer as a decently high priority, then you have a higher chance to get more resets on Avenger Shield, which will give you more interrupts, which gives you more Blessed Hammers, which gives you more interrupts again. In AoE, if there's an interrupt available, I prioritize Blessed Hammer over Hammer of Wrath, unless Avenger Shield is available and I'm holding it, in which case I'd prioritize Hammer of Wrath. All right, if there are no interrupts, then you play the basic rotation, which is Avenger Shield to maintain defensives, and then Judgment, and then Avenger Shield is your highest priority ability anyway, after Judgment. Then Hammer of Wrath to extend Wings, and then Blessed Hammer, and then Hammer of Wrath after that. For a single target, Judgment is still your highest priority ability, I'm pretty sure. Then Hammer of Wrath and Wings to extend Wings, then Avenger Shield, then Hammer of Wrath, no Wings, then Blessed Hammer. That's how I play the rotation. There may or may not be 1 or 2 things that you could prioritize differently. This is just how I do it, and I tend to do a lot of damage from what I've seen other people do in keys. Pretty sure this is correct. Optimizations for the hero talents. So for Lightsmith, you want to use Divine Guidance, 5 stacks. You want to use Sacred Weapon when you don't already have a Sacred Weapon, and as much during Wings as possible. There is a video I have on the YouTube channel specifically about Sacred Weapon and Holy Bulwark, so be sure to check that out for more info. For Templar, there's a buff called Shake the Heavens that you get every time you use a Hammer of Light, or when you get, basically every time you get Hammer of Light, either from Ive Tier or from Light's Deliverance. And you want your entire goal during Templar is to spam finishers, or everything you do is either to spam Shield of Righteous or extend that buff. Render's Shield as a non-interrupt is not really part of that agenda, so you're basically only using it to interrupt or to maintain defensive buffs. So your Season 2 tier set, this is what it is. Basically, it has, I think, 20% uptime last I checked. Whenever you use a finisher, it extends it, and then it also, or sorry, whenever you use Shield of the Righteous, it extends it, and it has a chance to refund Holy Power. Obviously, it also procs Guardian of Ancient King. This is actually a massive swing. Every time it procs, you can be like, oh, I'm dying. Okay, I proc Tierset, it's over, I can't pump. This gives you massive cooldown reduction on all of your abilities. It also gives you a lot of Shining Light procs because you're spamming Shield of the Righteous so much. And obviously it also just does damage, right? You're hitting Shield of the Righteous and proccing Imperial Hammer if you're Templar. So this is a very, very, very good tier set. Defensively, not quite as good as Season 1 offensively, but just be aware of it. And when it procs, just be spamming Shield of the Righteous to give yourself CDR. Alright, so the next session, we'll talk about Paladin utility. So the first thing we'll talk about is Tempered in Battle. There are a few things mentioned earlier. First of all, Tempered in Battle is nerfed. You can only proc one time per sacred weapon, which means it's not going to be like perma healing you or perma topping someone. It's just going to give you one tick. That one tick, however, is not limited. So as we mentioned before, Bubble plus Temper, still really OP. Temper is a spot heal. A lot of the times, like a boss will put out 2 debuffs on people, both ticking down for damage. And if they receive like very low healing, that debuff kills them. But if they receive 1 heal, they probably won't die. Throw a sacred weapon on them, then they'll hit 40%, and then they'll steal some of your health, and they'll probably survive. There is also another trick that we used in Season 1, Temper on mind-controlled mobs. So this is for Dominate Mind and Control Undead, usually. So Tempered in Battle works based on health amount, not based on health percentage. So any mob that you take control of in Mythic Plus is generally going to have like multiple times your health. So if you use Sacred Weapon on that mob and then you proc Tempered in Battle, you're shooting to full health pretty much every time. Now in Season 1, that was super OP because you're like shooting to full health permanently. In Season 2, you're only shooting to full health once. Also be careful because there is a bug. If this mob pops out of the MC while you have your weapon on it and you're proc Tempered in Battle, then your health like flip-flops between like 40% in full over and over. And eventually you can just die to the bug. Be careful of that. There is also another use for Tempered in Battle, which comes from Holy Bulwark. So Tempered in Battle actually has 2 parts. One is from the the health share from Sacred Weapon. There's also any overhealing done to a target with your Holy Bulwark is copied onto like both players that have Holy Bulwark. You can shield someone and then they take damage, and then you lay on hands yourself. And that'll actually lay on hands both of you effectively, because lay on hands will overheal you, and that overheal goes to your Holy Bulwark ally. Alright, so how to use Avenger Shield. We talk about this a little bit later, but most of the time you're going to be soloing one caster mob with Avenger Shield resets, and then your group is going to be kicking a different caster mob. If you have Resonance or Moment of Glory, you can kick 2 caster mobs at once while your group deals with the third one. Hammer of Justice, just a long stun. You can use it to make time for your interrupts or against fixate mobs. Or if there's just one mob that is not immune to CC and is like hitting you really hard, you can also hodge it. Blinding Light, 130 CD, AoE stop. Blessing of Sacrifice, so this is a 1-minute cooldown. You want to be using it as much as possible against hard heal check bosses. Anytime someone gets picked like by a dot or by like the boss's fixate or something, you can usually attack them and they'll live. If there's any poison or disease, Righteous Protector also makes Blessing of Sacrifice a complete immunity to that. So in Season 1, the first boss of Necrotic Wake is a good example of that. Thieving Wretch was like a very hard one-shot check, but it counted as a disease. So if you sacked it, they just completely immuned it on a 1-minute cooldown. If there's anything like that in Season 2, which I don't think there is, then it'll be useful for that. Spell warding, obviously you can spell ward other people, not just yourself, makes them immune. Very useful for like disc priests because they like to stand still casting smite, and sometimes they have to dodge ground effects, but if you spell ward them, then they can just send their healing instead of having to dodge and heal at the same time. Also, they'll be immune to damage, and disc priests tend to be like one of the more in danger players in the group when there's AoE damage happening. Ops, same thing, except it works against physical damage. You also have Poison Dispel, but be very careful when you're Poison Dispelling because it costs a lot of mana. Generally, you want to try to use Sack instead of Dispel, since Sack costs no mana, it is off global. On hands, you can lay other people other than yourself, but keep in mind that if you lay on someone else, obviously you can't lay on hands yourself. So Word of Glory is not that good for healing other people. You can use it if you're literally under no pressure and the group is dying. You can Word of Glory, but it's not very effective. You would much rather use Lay on Hands on someone or temper them. You do have Blessing of Freedom, obviously, since you're a Paladin, so Anytime there's a slower route, you can immune it, and you can also immune your ally to it. Holy Shield, if you're playing Lightsmith, you do have Holy Bulwark. If you have an ally, you can just send it on someone for Holy Bulwark. It also does prevent them from getting one shot usually, so keep that in mind as well. We're going to talk about Avenger Shield macros now. The way I play this usually is I'll set a mob to my focus, and then you can use cast at focus Avenger Shield, same as like focus kick, except focus Avenger Shield. And then also to interact with resonance. So your divine toll has an ability called resonance. Every time you toll, every 3 seconds for the next 15 seconds, I think every 5 seconds, sorry, for the next 15 seconds, it'll throw out an extra Avenger's Shield, and that throws at your target. So generally in pulls, you want to be targeting like the big mob, and the big mob is usually not the caster. So the way that we fix this is by having a macro that targets our focus. You focus the caster, and then you target the big mob usually. Then whenever your shield is about to come out, you should have some sort of weak aura. You can hit your target focus macro. You target your focus very quickly, proc the resonance, and then go back to targeting the main mob for priority damage. If you don't want to play that way, then you can just target the caster the whole time, but your priority damage will be lacking if you do that. There's also some other macros, such as you can like, before the key starts, if you know during the key that you're going to spellward someone or sack someone, freedom someone even, you can just write their name into a macro and then push it during the key. In season 1, I kind of played with a spellwarding. I played with three spellwarding macros actually. So one spellwarding macro was just like at whatever I was targeting, which is like basically from the spellbook. The second spellwarding macro was hard coded to just spellwarding my shaman, since I was casting spellwarding on the shaman so much. I wouldn't have to target him to just push it. And the other warding macro was spellward target of target. So against a lot of bosses, this was very useful because I would say like, oh yeah, whoever he targets next with this thing, I'm gonna spellward that person. And I would just push spellward as target of target instead of having to like look at the nameplate to see who he's targeting and then click on the frame and then click spellwarding. I could just like push one button. I also have that macro for a blessing of sacrifice. And I also had a sack shaman macro in season 1. I'm not sure what the meta actually will be in season 2. But you can feel free to make that. Cancelaura macro is very important. Cancel bubble and cancel bop. But cancel bubble is somewhat important because sometimes your bubble can bug out and just not taunt anything. So you want to cancel it before your whole group dies. Also, cancel bop is important because obviously the way we mentioned earlier, sometimes you take bop to either immune a tank buster or take off some bleeds. You want to cancel that so that your group doesn't get meleeed. Divine Toll Resonance can pull through some mobs. So you use Resonance on a mob that you're like currently in combat with. And then you target a mob through a wall before the next like tick of the shield comes out. Then you should throw the shield at the mob through the wall. We mentioned earlier that you can temper a mind control mob. This is like the macro that I would use for that target. And then you write the mob name there and then use sacred weapon and then target last target. That's it for the written guide. We are going to go over 2 pull examples from the PTR. So this is a Templar key in the Motherlode. Running into the pull, we pre-Blessed Hammer to get a Holy Power. Then we Blessed Hammer one more time, or Judgment when we're in the pull to get fully 3, so we can use Shield of Righteous while running in. While running in, we're kind of just spamming like random abilities plus Shield of Righteous, keeping Shield of Righteous the whole time. You can use Lay on Hands here, something I probably should have done, to be honest. If you're low and running in, it's Lay on Hands on pull is fine. Actually, I did do that. Holy shit. I didn't even think I did that, but yeah, this is a good thing to do while you're running in. You're probably going to take a lot of damage if you're running past a bunch of mobs with like not in wings, not healing yourself, not in consecrate, etc. Be ready to use Lay on Hands immediately. So our strat here, I don't know how our priest died, by the way. I think he aggroed back over here, is to run around the corner. Since we're playing Templar, we use Ardent on pull anyway, and then we also use Eye of Tyr on pull. Immediately use the Hammer of Light to proc Shake the Heavens. This is my Shake the Heavens tracker. This is Light's Deliverance, by the way. When this gets to 60, I get another free Hammer of Light. While we're in the pull, we're just spamming Judgment and Hammer of Wrath. We will use Blessed Hammer if I was like interrupting as much as I should have, but I'm not really interrupting. As soon as I see this Peacekeeper put up his buff, Charge Shield, I should bubble it. This is like his major tank / group hit. Once the bubble's over, he actually somehow still has the buff. By the way, I think this mob is overtuned. We're cutting a little bit out of the circles. I think I probably could have used something here. I actually do use Bomb Suit here to fill in because I don't want to use Guardian yet. Now I have Ardent up. I could use Ardent if he was still alive, but he's dead, so I don't use it. Also note the whole time we did maintain Shake the Heavens. So that is a sample pull as Templar. Really not much to it, just use your cooldowns. Use Wings and Tier at the start of the pull once it's set up. Ardent on pull, and then Bubble plus one other thing, probably either Guardian or Tank Trinket. Should tide you over till next Ardent, but the pack was dead by then, so I didn't have to use it. All right, next we're gonna do a sample Lightsmith pull. So this is Theater of Pain, one of the classic pulls that people did in Shadowlands. which is the entire first area of the poison wing. We're gonna go back and talk about it. So we run in, we wings a little bit early so we can start joining holy power, tag the far pack. Then you'll notice I was kind of not facing the mobs for a little bit, but as soon as I tag the pack, I'm backing up in a way that all the mobs are going to be facing me. Probably should have used Ardent by now. Honestly, I think this is a mistake not using Ardent. We use Divine Guidance at 5 stacks. Also, once it's grouped, we're going to use Divine Toll. I think this pull is just really easy because I didn't Ardent until the very end. But I probably should have Ardented way earlier. And then this tank buster would have been Guardian. And then the next one probably would have been Bubble if they're still alive. Alright, so that is the simple Templar and Lightsmith pull. And that actually does it for the Paladin guide. So that's it for the video. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.